It was almost midnight when Daniel pulled his black SUV into the parking garage of Sunset Sound Studios. He was tired, irritated, and running 3 hours behind schedule. His new album was due in 2 weeks, and he still hadn't nailed the piano track for what was supposed to be the lead single. The pressure was getting to him, and everyone around him could feel it. Daniel wasn't just any musician. He was the guy whose face you'd see on billboards across Los Angeles, the artist whose songs played in every coffee shop and shopping mall. 3 Grammy Awards sat on his shelf at home, and his last tour had sold out arenas across the country. People knew him for his incredible piano skills, his smooth voice, and those emotional ballads that somehow made grown men cry. He'd built his entire reputation on being a musical genius, and he wore that badge with pride, maybe a little too much pride. He grabbed his leather jacket from the passenger seat and headed toward the elevator. The building was quiet at this hour. Most artists preferred late-night sessions because there were fewer distractions, no traffic, and something about the darkness just felt right for creating music. Daniel had booked Studio A from midnight until 6 in the morning. It was the biggest room in the building, with the best grand piano in the city, a Steinway Model D that cost more than most people's houses. As the elevator doors opened on the 3rd floor, Daniel heard something that made him stop mid-step. Music. Piano music. And not just any piano music. Someone was playing Rachmaninoff. He knew the piece immediately because he'd tried learning it years ago and given up. Piano Concerto No. 2. One of the most technically demanding pieces ever written. The kind of thing that separated good pianists from truly exceptional ones. But here's the thing that really grabbed his attention. Whoever was playing it wasn't just hitting the right notes. They were making it sing. Every phrase had emotion. Every run was crystal clear. The dynamics went from whisper-soft to thunderous, and somehow it all felt effortless. Daniel felt his chest tighten a little. He'd heard professional concert pianists play this piece, and whoever was in his studio right now was giving them serious competition. His first thought was anger. He'd paid good money for this studio time. Who had the nerve to be using his session? He walked quickly down the hallway, his expensive sneakers squeaking slightly on the polished floor. The music got louder as he approached Studio A. Through the small window in the door, he could see the piano, but not who was playing it. The angle was wrong. Daniel pushed the door open, ready to tell whoever it was to get out. The words died in his throat. Sitting at his piano was a woman in a gray cleaning uniform. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and a name tag pinned to her shirt read Rosa. Next to the door sat a cleaning cart loaded with supplies, a mop, and a yellow bucket. The woman, Rosa, had her eyes closed, completely lost in the music. Her hands moved across the keys with the kind of confidence that only came from years of serious training. Daniel just stood there, frozen. His brain couldn't quite process what he was seeing. A cleaning lady. Playing Rachmaninoff, playing it better than he could ever dream of playing it. The piece built to its emotional climax, and he watched her lean into it, her whole body swaying with the music. It was like watching someone pour their soul out through their fingertips. When the final notes faded into silence, Rosa sat still for a moment, her hands resting gently on the keys. Then she opened her eyes, and that's when she saw Daniel standing in the doorway. The color drained from her face. She jumped up so quickly that the piano bench scraped backward with a harsh sound. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Her accent was thick, and her words tumbled out in a panic. "I was just cleaning, and I saw the piano, and I thought nobody was here, and I'm sorry. I'll leave right now. Please don't tell my supervisor. Please, I need this job." She rushed toward her cleaning cart, her hands shaking as she gripped the handle. Daniel noticed her fingers. Long, elegant fingers with calluses in all the places pianists got them. These weren't the hands of someone who just played piano as a hobby. These were the hands of someone who'd spent thousands of hours practicing. "Wait," Daniel said, still trying to wrap his head around what he'd just witnessed. "Where did you learn to play like that?" Rosa paused, her knuckles white as she gripped the cart handle. She looked at the floor. "It doesn't matter. I'm sorry for wasting your time. The studio is all yours." "I'm not mad," Daniel said, which surprised him because 5 minutes ago he absolutely would have been. "Seriously, I need to know. Nobody plays Rachmaninoff like that without serious training. Where did you study?" Rosa's shoulders relaxed just a little bit. She looked up at him, and Daniel could see something in her eyes. Pride, maybe. Or sadness. Probably both, back home. In Colombia, she said quietly. I went to the National Conservatory in Bogota. Full scholarship. Piano performance. I was going to be a concert pianist. That was the dream, you know? That was always the dream. What happened? Daniel asked, genuinely curious now. Rosa let out a long breath. Life happened. My father's business went under. The economy crashed. We lost everything. My parents decided we needed to come here, to America, for better opportunities. I was 19. I thought maybe I could continue my studies here, but she shrugged. It's complicated. My degree doesn't count here. I'd have to start over, take all the exams again, pay for everything again. And we needed money immediately. My little sister was still in school. My parents were too old to learn English quickly enough to find good jobs. Daniel nodded slowly. He'd heard stories like this before, but he'd never really paid attention. It was always something happening to other people, far away from his world of record deals and sold-out shows. So you clean offices, he said. I clean studios. Rosa corrected him with a small, sad smile. At least I get to be around music. And sometimes when nobody's here, I get to play. Just for a few minutes. It's the only thing that keeps me sane, you know? Reminds me of who I used to be. Who I thought I was going to be. Something about her words hit Daniel harder than he expected. Here was someone with more talent than most of the professional musicians he knew. And she was pushing a mop for minimum wage. Meanwhile, he complained when his latte wasn't hot enough. But instead of feeling humbled, Daniel felt something else rising in his chest. Something he wasn't proud of, his ego. That little voice that had always driven him to be the best, to prove he was special. The same voice that made him practice 8 hours a day as a kid and fight his way to the top of the industry. That voice didn't like being overshadowed, especially not in his own studio, especially not by someone in a cleaning uniform. Classical music is one thing, Daniel heard himself say, his tone shifting, but that's just reading notes on a page, right? Following what someone else wrote hundreds of years ago. Can you actually play real music? Can you improvise? The moment the words left his mouth, he knew they were wrong. He knew they were unfair, but his pride wouldn't let him take them back. Rosa's expression changed. The nervousness faded, replaced by something steelier. She stood up straighter and looked him directly in the eye. What do you want to hear? She asked, her voice quiet but firm. Daniel walked over to the piano and leaned against it, arms crossed. Surprise me. Rosa walked back to the piano slowly. She didn't say anything, but Daniel could see her jaw was set in a way that told him he'd crossed a line. Good, he thought. Let her be mad. Let her try to prove him wrong and fail. Then things could go back to making sense. She sat down at the bench and adjusted it slightly, moving it back to where it had been before she jumped up. Her hands hovered over the keys for just a second, and Daniel noticed they weren't shaking anymore. Whatever nervousness she'd felt earlier was gone now. She looked focused, determined, maybe even a little angry. You want improvisation? Rosa said without looking at him. You want real music? Okay. She started playing, and Daniel recognized the song immediately. It was Autumn Leaves, the old jazz standard that every piano player knew. But knowing a song and being able to really play it were two completely different things. Daniel waited for her to mess up, to prove that she was just a classical player who could read sheet music but couldn't actually feel the music. Except she didn't mess up, not even close. Rosa played through the main melody once, straight and simple, just to establish it. Then she started to change it. Her left hand laid down a walking bass line that was smooth and steady, while her right hand began dancing around the melody, adding little flourishes and runs. It was textbook jazz piano, the kind of thing you'd hear in a dimly lit club at 2 a.m. But she was just getting started. About a minute in, something shifted. The rhythm changed, and suddenly there was this Latin flavor to everything. The bass pattern got more complex, more syncopated. Her right hand started playing these quick percussive runs that reminded Daniel of salsa music. It was still Autumn Leaves, but now it sounded like it was being played in a club in Havana instead of a smoky bar in New York. The transformation was seamless, natural, like she was just showing him different colors of the same picture. Daniel felt his arms uncross. He stood up straighter. This wasn't what he'd expected at all. Then Rosa switched gears again. The Latin influence faded, and she dropped into this deep bluesy feel. Her left hand started hitting these heavy, soulful chords while her right hand bent notes in a way that made the piano sound almost like it was crying. She played with the timing, pushing and pulling against the beat, making the whole thing feel loose and emotional. It was the kind of playing that came from somewhere deep inside, not from any textbook or teacher. Daniel's producer, Tony, poked his head through the door. He'd been setting up equipment in the control room and must have heard the music. His eyes went wide when he saw it was the cleaning lady playing. He stepped into the room quietly, not wanting to disturb her. Then Karen from the front desk appeared. Then Mike, the sound engineer who'd been working late in Studio B one by one. People were drawn to the music like moths to a flame. Rosa either didn't notice or didn't care. She was somewhere else now, lost in what she was creating. And then she did something that made Daniel's stomach drop. She started weaving in his song. Midnight Dreams, the ballad that had made him famous 3 years ago. His signature song, the one everyone associated with him. She took the main melody and started threading it through Autumn Leaves like they'd always belonged together. The chord progressions were different, but somehow she made them work. She'd take a phrase from his song, twist it, play it in a minor key, then resolve it back into the jazz standard. It was brilliant. It was creative. And it was absolutely showing him up in his own studio. The small crowd that had gathered was completely silent, barely breathing. Rosa built the improvisation higher and higher, her hands moving faster, the music getting more intense. She combined everything she'd shown them, the classical technique, the jazz feel, the Latin rhythms, the bluesy soul, and Daniel's own melody, into this one massive, beautiful moment. Then, just when it seemed like it couldn't get any bigger, she brought it all back down. Soft and gentle, she played the last few notes of Autumn Leaves in its original form, simple and pure, and let the final chord ring out into silence. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Tony started clapping and everyone else joined in. The applause in the small studio was loud and genuine. Rosa looked up, seeming surprised to see other people there. Her cheeks flushed red and that nervous look came back to her face. That was incredible, Karen said, practically bouncing with excitement. How are you not famous? How are you cleaning studios instead of playing concerts? Rosa stood up from the bench quickly, like she suddenly remembered where she was and what she was supposed to be doing. Thank you, but I really should get back to work. I have 6 more floors to clean tonight. Daniel felt like he'd been punched in the gut. His challenge had backfired spectacularly. This woman had just demonstrated more musicality in 10 minutes than he'd shown in his last 3 albums combined. And she was worried about mopping floors. Wait, he said, and his voice came out smaller than he intended. Just wait a second. Rosa paused, her hand on the cleaning cart again. Everyone was looking at Daniel now, waiting to see what he'd say. His mind was racing. Part of him wanted to just let her leave, pretend this never happened, go back to his comfortable world where he was the talented one. But there was another part of him, a part he didn't like to acknowledge, that knew he'd been a complete jerk. I'm sorry, Daniel said, and the words felt strange coming out of his mouth. He wasn't someone who apologized often. What I said before about classical music just being notes on a page about real music, that was wrong. That was really wrong, and stupid. Rosa's expression softened slightly, but she still looked wary. You asked me what happened, she said quietly. Why I'm here instead of performing. You want to know the real answer? Daniel nodded. The other people in the room seemed to sense this was becoming a private conversation, but nobody left. They all wanted to hear her story too. I've been in Los Angeles for 4 years now, Rosa began, her voice steady but sad. The first year I tried everything. I sent audition tapes to orchestras. I applied to be a session musician. I even tried playing at restaurants and hotels. You know what they all said? They said my credentials weren't valid. They said I needed to have a degree from an American school, or at least pass all the certification exams here. Do you know how much those exams cost? Thousands of dollars. Thousands of dollars I didn't have because I was sending money home to help my parents pay rent and keep my sister in school. She took a breath, and Daniel could see her hands were trembling again. But this time it wasn't from nerves. It was from emotion, from years of frustration finally coming out. I played for free at open mic nights. I posted videos online. I handed out business cards offering piano lessons. And you know what? Nothing. Because nobody takes you seriously when you tell them you were a concert pianist in Colombia. They smile and nod and think you're exaggerating. Or they think classical training from South America doesn't count as much as training from Europe or America. Or they just see an immigrant woman with an accent and they can't imagine you being that good. Tony shifted uncomfortably. Karen was looking at the floor. Mike had his arms crossed, shaking his head slowly. So I took the night shift cleaning job, Rosa continued, because it pays better than day shift, and because I get to be alone with the instruments sometimes. And for a few minutes each night I get to remember what it felt like to be a musician instead of invisible. The word, invisible, hung in the air like smoke. Daniel felt it settle on his shoulders, heavy and uncomfortable. Here he was, worried about whether his new album would go platinum or just gold, while this woman, who had more talent in her pinky finger than most people had in their whole body, was scrubbing toilets just to survive. That's not right, Daniel said, and he meant it. That's not right. Rosa gave him a sad smile. No, it's not. But it's reality. It's my reality anyway. And it's the reality for a lot of people like me. We bring our dreams to America, and then we spend years just trying to pay rent. She started pushing her cart toward the door again. I really do need to finish my work. Thank you for listening, and thank you for not getting me fired. As she reached the doorway, Daniel made a decision. It was impulsive, maybe even reckless, but it felt like the first real thing he'd done in a long time. What's your phone number? He asked. Rosa turned back, confused. What? Your phone number? I want it. Daniel pulled out his phone. I'm serious. Give me your number. Why? Rosa asked, suspicion creeping into her voice. Daniel looked at Tony, who was watching him with raised eyebrows. Then he looked back at Rosa. Because I'm going to fix this, Daniel said. I don't know exactly how yet, but I'm going to fix this. You're too talented to be invisible, and I think I might be able to help. Rosa stared at Daniel like he'd just spoken in a language he didn't understand. Her grip tightened on the cleaning cart and she shook her head slowly. No offense, but I've heard this before, she said, her voice flat. Rich people, famous people, they hear me play and they get all excited. They say they're going to help. They say they know someone who knows someone. They take my number and then nothing. 3 days later, I'm still mopping floors and they've forgotten I exist. Daniel felt that sting and he deserved it. He knew exactly what she was talking about. He'd done it himself at parties and events, made promises he never intended to keep just to feel good about himself in the moment. But this felt different. This had to be different. I get it, Daniel said. I do, but I'm not asking for your number to make myself feel better. I'm asking because what I just saw was real. And if I don't do something about it, I'm going to feel like garbage every time I sit at that piano. Tony stepped forward. He's serious, miss. I've worked with Daniel for 6 years, and I've never seen him look at anyone the way he's looking at you right now. Like he just witnessed something that changed his whole perspective. Rosa looked between them, clearly torn. Finally, she sighed and rattled off her number. Daniel typed it into his phone immediately and called it so she'd have his number too. Her phone, an old model with a cracked screen, buzzed in her uniform pocket. I'm going to call you tomorrow, Daniel said. Actually, I'm going to call you in about 8 hours because it's already tomorrow. Get some sleep after your shift. We're going to figure this out. Rosa nodded slowly, still looking skeptical, and pushed her cart out into the hallway. The small group watched her go, the wheels squeaking slightly as she disappeared around the corner. Once she was gone, everyone turned to look at Daniel. Okay, so what's the plan? Tony asked. Because you just made a promise to that woman and I really hope you're not going to break it. Daniel ran his hand through his hair. Honestly, he didn't have a plan. He'd acted on impulse, which wasn't like him at all. He was usually calculated, careful, always thinking 3 steps ahead. But something about Rosa's story about watching her talent being wasted had gotten under his skin. I don't know yet, Daniel admitted, but she needs credentials, right? She needs to prove she's as good as she is, and she needs connections, people who can open doors for her. Karen, who'd been quiet until now, spoke up. My sister works in arts administration at the university. They have programs for international musicians, ways to get credentials evaluated and fast-tracked. It's not free, but it's cheaper than starting over completely. Money's not an issue, Daniel said quickly. If she needs help with fees, exams, whatever, I'll cover it. Mike crossed his arms. That's good, but it's not enough. The music industry is all about who you know. She could have every certificate in the world and still get nowhere if nobody gives her a shot. So we give her a shot, Daniel said, the idea forming as he spoke. My album. I need piano work anyway, and I was going to hire session musicians. What if I hire her instead? Get her into the studio as a professional, not a cleaning lady. Let her build some credentials, get her name on a real album. Tony's eyes lit up. That could actually work. And if people hear what she can do if she's credited on a Daniel Chen album, that's instant credibility. Doors would open. Daniel felt a spark of excitement. This could really work. But then reality crashed back in. Wait, would that even be legal? Can I just hire her like that? Don't you need work permits and all that stuff? She's already working here, so she must have the right paperwork, Karen pointed out. But yeah, you'd need to check all that. Get a lawyer involved, make sure everything's above board. First thing in the morning, Daniel said. I'll call my lawyer, my manager, whoever needs to be involved. We're doing this right. The group talked for another 20 minutes, throwing out ideas, making plans. By the time everyone finally left and Daniel was alone in the studio, the sun was starting to come up. He hadn't recorded a single note for his album, but somehow he felt better than he had in weeks. Like he was doing something that actually mattered. He pulled out his phone and looked at Rosa's number. 8 hours, he'd said. He set an alarm to make sure he'd call her when he promised. Then, exhausted, he headed home. Daniel barely slept. His mind kept replaying Rosa's performance, the emotion in her playing, the sadness in her voice when she talked about being invisible. By noon, he was already on the phone with his lawyer, explaining the situation. The lawyer, a sharp woman named Lisa who'd handled all his contracts for years, listened carefully. It's doable, Lisa said after Daniel finished. If she has work authorization, we can hire her as an independent contractor for the album. We'll need to draw up proper contracts, make sure she's paid fairly, all the standard stuff. But Daniel, I need to ask, are you sure about this? You're taking a risk on someone you just met. I've never been more sure of anything, Daniel said, and he meant it. Lisa, if you'd heard her play, you'd understand. This isn't charity. This is me being smart enough to recognize talent when I see it. All right then. Send me your contact information and I'll get started on the paperwork. Next, Daniel called his manager, Vincent, who was significantly less enthusiastic. You want to do what? Vincent's voice came through the phone, sharp and loud. Daniel, we have professional session musicians lined up. People we've worked with for years. People who are reliable. Rosa is reliable, Daniel argued. And she's better than anyone we've ever worked with. You heard her play once, one time. You have no idea if she can handle the pressure of a real recording session, if she can take direction, if she can deliver what we need. Daniel felt his jaw tighten. So we'll do a test session. Bring her in, see how she works. If it doesn't pan out fine, we go with the original plan. But Vincent, I'm telling you, this woman is special. There was a long pause. Vincent sighed heavily. Fine, one test session. But if this blows up in your face, don't say I didn't warn you. By the time Daniel finally called Rosa, it was late afternoon. She answered on the fourth ring, her voice thick with sleep. Hello? Rosa, it's Daniel. From the studio last night. Did I wake you? It's okay, she said, though he could hear her yawning. I just got up. My shift starts at 8, so I usually sleep during the day. About that, Daniel said. How would you feel about taking a night off? Rosa laughed, but there wasn't much humor in it. I can't afford to take nights off. I have bills to pay. What if I paid you for the night? Actually, what if I paid you significantly more than you make cleaning and you came and worked with me in the studio instead? Silence on the other end. Daniel could almost hear her thinking. This is real? Rosa asked quietly. You're not messing with me? I'm completely serious. I talked to my lawyer this morning. I talked to my manager. We want to hire you to work on my album. Piano work, arrangements, maybe some composition if you're interested. This is a real offer, Rosa. A professional opportunity. He heard her breath catch. Daniel, I don't know what to say. Say yes. Say you'll come to the studio tomorrow night. We'll do a test session, and if it goes well, which I know it will, we'll move forward with a full contract. Yes, Rosa said, and her voice was shaking. Yes, of course, yes. Thank you. Thank you so much. Don't thank me yet. You're going to earn every penny. I'm not going easy on you just because I feel bad about last night. If you're going to work on my album, you're going to have to keep up with me. Rosa laughed, and this time it sounded genuine. I think I can handle that. They talked for a few more minutes, working out details. Daniel told her about the lawyer, about the paperwork she'd need to bring, about the pay rate they were offering. With each piece of information, he could hear her becoming more real to her, more believable. When they finally hung up, Daniel sat back on his couch and let out a long breath. What had he just done? He'd completely derailed his album schedule, committed to working with someone he barely knew, and put his reputation on the line for a woman he'd met less than 24 hours ago. But then he remembered her hands on the piano keys, the way she'd transformed autumn leaves into something magical, the emotion in her playing that he'd been trying to capture in his own music for years but never quite could. No, he told himself. This wasn't crazy. This was the smartest decision he'd made in a long time. His phone buzzed with a text. It was from Tony. Mike recorded Rosa playing last night on his phone. Just watched it again. Dude, you made the right call. This is going to be incredible, Daniel smiled. Yeah, it was going to be incredible. Or it was going to be a complete disaster. Either way, at least it would be interesting. The next evening, Daniel arrived at the studio early. He wanted everything to be perfect. He'd brought in his best microphones, had Tony set up multiple camera angles because he wanted to document this properly, and he'd even ordered dinner for everyone because he knew Rosa probably wouldn't have time to eat before coming. When Rosa walked through the door at 8 o'clock, she looked different. She was wearing jeans and a nice blouse instead of her cleaning uniform. Her hair was down, falling past her shoulders. She carried a worn leather bag that looked like it had traveled thousands of miles with her. You look nervous, Daniel said with a smile. I am nervous, Rosa admitted. I haven't done a real recording session in 5 years. What if I'm rusty? What if I mess up? Daniel walked over to the piano and sat down at the bench. Come here. Sit down. Rosa sat next to him and he played a simple C major scale. Music doesn't forget you, he said. It's still there waiting. You proved that last night. So stop worrying about messing up and just play. Play like nobody's listening. Play like you're alone in here at midnight. Stealing a few minutes with an instrument you love. Can you do that? Rosa took a deep breath and nodded. I can do that. Good, Daniel said, standing up. Then let's make something beautiful. The first hour of the recording session was rough. Not because Rosa couldn't play. She could play circles around anyone Daniel had ever worked with. The problem was that she was trying too hard to be perfect. Every time she made the tiniest mistake, something so small that most people wouldn't even notice, she'd stop and apologize and want to start over. Rosa, stop, Daniel finally said after she'd restarted the same piece for the 5th time. You're thinking too much. This isn't a conservatory exam. Nobody's grading you on technical perfection. But this is your album, Rosa said, frustration clear in her voice. It needs to be perfect. You're paying me to be professional. Daniel walked over to the piano and sat down on the bench beside her again. You want to know a secret? Some of my biggest hits have mistakes in them. Little timing things, notes that are slightly off, but nobody cares because the feeling is right. The emotion is there. That's what people connect with. He played a few bars of Midnight Dreams, intentionally rushing one part and hesitating on another. See, not perfect. But it still works because the heart of it is real. That's what I need from you. Not perfection, truth. Rosa looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, truth, I can do truth. I know you can. I heard it last night when you didn't know anyone was listening. They started again, and this time Rosa relaxed into it. Her playing opened up, became more expressive. She took risks, added flourishes that weren't in the arrangement Daniel had given her, and it was exactly what the song needed. Tony, watching from the control booth, gave Daniel a thumbs up through the glass. 3 hours into the session, they had recorded 4 songs. 4 songs that sounded better than anything Daniel had produced in the last year. Rosa's playing added layers of emotion and complexity that elevated his melodies to something completely new. Between takes, they'd talk about the music, debate about chord progressions, argue about tempo. It reminded Daniel of why he'd fallen in love with music in the first place. It wasn't about the fame or the awards. It was about this. Creating something with another person who understood the language. Can I ask you something? Rosa said during a break. They were eating the Thai food Daniel had ordered, sitting on the floor of the studio like college students instead of professionals. Sure, Daniel said around a mouthful of pad Thai. Why are you really doing this? And don't say it's because you feel guilty or because you want to help. There's something else. I can tell. Daniel put down his food and thought about how to answer honestly. You're going to think this sounds stupid. Try me. I've been making music for 15 years now, Daniel said slowly. And somewhere along the way I lost something. I got so focused on chart positions and radio play and what the critics would say that I forgot why I started doing this. Last night, watching you play when you thought nobody was listening, I saw something I haven't seen in a long time. Pure joy. You were playing for yourself for the love of it, and I realized I haven't done that in years. Rosa listened, her expression soft. So yeah, I want to help you, Daniel continued. But honestly, I think you're helping me more. You're reminding me what music is supposed to be. That doesn't sound stupid at all, Rosa said quietly. They finished eating in comfortable silence, then got back to work. By the time the sun came up, they'd recorded 8 songs. Daniel was exhausted but energized in a way he hadn't felt in months. Rosa looked tired too, but she was smiling. Actually smiling, not the sad, resigned expression she'd worn when he first met her. Same time tomorrow? Daniel asked as they were packing up. I have to work tomorrow night, Rosa said, then caught herself. Wait, no. I have to call my supervisor and tell her I'm quitting, don't I? Daniel grinned. Probably a good idea. This is going to be more than a 1-week gig if you want it. My lawyer drew up a 3-month contract with an option to extend. It's good pay, Rosa. Really good pay. She pulled out the contract Lisa had emailed her and stared at the numbers again like she still couldn't believe they were real. This is more than I make in 6 months of cleaning. You're worth it, Daniel said simply. The question is, do you want to do this? Because once we commit, once your name is on this album and people hear what you can do, your life is going to change. You ready for that? Rosa looked around the studio. At the piano, the microphones, the mixing board visible through the control room window. This was the world she'd dreamed about since she was a little girl in Colombia, playing on her grandmother's old upright piano. She'd thought that dream was dead, buried under years of rejection and struggle and invisibility. I'm ready, she said. Over the next 3 weeks, Rosa became a permanent fixture at the studio. She and Daniel worked almost every night, creating music that surprised both of them. Word started spreading in the industry. Other musicians would drop by just to hear what they were working on. Tony posted a short clip on social media of Rosa playing, not identifying her, just captioning it, "New collaborator on the album. Mind blown." The clip went viral. Within 48 hours, it had 3 million views. People were trying to figure out who the mysterious pianist was. Music blogs were speculating. Some people thought it might be a famous classical musician doing a crossover. Others thought Daniel had somehow convinced a reclusive jazz legend to come out of retirement. Daniel's phone wouldn't stop ringing. His publicist was thrilled. His manager Vincent, who'd been skeptical at first, now wanted to build the entire album marketing campaign around the mystery of Rosa's identity. But Daniel shut that down immediately. No, he said firmly during a conference call with his team. We're not turning her into a gimmick. When we reveal who she is, we do it right. We tell her story, the real story, but we do it in a way that respects her. This isn't about creating buzz for my album. This is about launching her career. Daniel, with all due respect, it's your album, his publicist said. We should use every advantage we have. Then use the advantage that the music is incredible, Daniel shot back. That should be enough. He looked over at Rosa, who was sitting quietly in the corner of the room during the call. She gave him a small, grateful smile. After the call ended, Rosa spoke up. You didn't have to do that. I know how this industry works. If using my story helps the album, I'm okay with that. I'm not, Daniel said. I've seen too many people get used and thrown away by this business. That's not happening to you. We do this on your terms at your pace, deal? Deal. As the album came together, Lisa, Daniel's lawyer, was working on the other side of things. She'd connected Rosa with the university program Karen had mentioned. Rosa was going through the process of getting her credentials evaluated and recognized. It was expensive and time-consuming, but Daniel covered all the costs without hesitation. He also connected her with an immigration lawyer to make sure everything was above board and to explore options for more permanent work authorization in the music field. One evening, about a month after they'd started working together, Rosa showed up to the studio with tears in her eyes. Daniel immediately thought something was wrong. What happened? Is your family okay? They're fine, Rosa said, laughing and crying at the same time. More than fine. Daniel, I just got an email from the Los Angeles Chamber Orchestra. They want me to audition. An actual audition for a real position. They saw the clips online and tracked me down through your team. Daniel felt a surge of pride. That's incredible. When's the audition? Next week. But here's the thing. They want me to prepare 3 pieces, including one by a contemporary composer. And I was thinking, she hesitated, would you consider writing something for me? Something I could premiere at the audition? Daniel felt his throat tighten with emotion. A month ago, This woman had been pushing a cleaning cart through his studio. Now she was asking him to compose a piece for her orchestral audition. The whole thing felt surreal. It would be an honor, he said. They spent the next week working on the composition during the day and finishing the album at night. Daniel poured everything he had into the piece for Rosa. It needed to showcase her classical technique, but also her jazz sensibilities, her Latin influences, all the things that made her playing unique. It needed to be unmistakably her. The night before her audition, they did a final run-through. The piece was 7 minutes long, moving through different moods and styles, challenging but not showy. When Rosa played the last note and it faded into silence, Tony came out of the control booth with tears streaming down his face. "That's it," he said. "That's the one. If they don't hire her after hearing that, they're deaf." Rosa laughed nervously. "No pressure or anything. You're going to be amazing," Daniel said. "Just play it like you played everything this month. With truth. With heart. Show them who you really are." The next morning, Daniel couldn't focus on anything. He kept checking his phone, waiting for Rosa to text him about how the audition went. Hours passed with no word. He started to worry. What if it hadn't gone well? What if all this hope he'd given her just led to more disappointment? Finally, at 3 p.m, his phone rang. It was Rosa, and she was screaming so loud he had to hold the phone away from his ear. "I got it. Daniel, I got it. They offered me the position. A real position with the orchestra. I'm going to be a professional musician again." Daniel felt something break open in his chest. Joy pure and simple. "I knew it. I knew they'd see how talented you are. It's because of you," Rosa said, her voice thick with emotion. "Because you gave me a chance when nobody else would. Because you saw me when I was invisible." "No," Daniel said firmly. "It's because of you. Your talent, your dedication, your refusal to give up even when everything was against you. I just opened a door. You're the one who walked through it." They talked for another 20 minutes, Rosa telling him every detail of the audition, how nervous she'd been, how the panel had reacted to the piece Daniel wrote. When they finally hung up, Daniel sat in his quiet apartment and let himself feel something he hadn't felt in a long time. He felt like he'd done something that mattered, something real, something that would last beyond album sales and award shows. And for the first time in years, that felt like enough. The album released 3 months later, and it was everything Daniel had hoped for, and more. Critics called it his most mature work, his most emotionally resonant collection of songs. But what really got people talking was the piano work. Music journalists couldn't stop writing about the mysterious collaborator who'd elevated every track. The credits listed Rosa Martinez as the principal pianist, but most people still didn't know her story. Daniel's team wanted to do the big reveal during album release week, but Daniel had a different idea. He wanted to wait for the right moment. That moment came when he got invited to perform on one of the biggest late-night talk shows in the country. The host, known for loving music and giving artists real time to perform, had specifically requested that Daniel bring his pianist. "This is it," Daniel told Rosa over coffee a week before the show. "This is your introduction to the world. Are you ready?" Rosa gripped her cup with both hands. She'd come so far in the last few months. The orchestra position was going well. She'd moved into a better apartment and was able to bring her sister to visit from Colombia for the first time in years. But national television was different. That was millions of people watching, judging, forming opinions in seconds. "I'm terrified," she admitted. "What if I freeze up? What if people don't like me?" "People are going to love you," Daniel said. "But more importantly, you need to remember something. You didn't get here because of luck. You got here because you're incredibly talented and you worked harder than anyone I know. That doesn't change just because there are cameras around." The night of the show, Rosa stood backstage in a beautiful dress that Daniel's stylist had picked out for her. She looked elegant and professional, but Daniel could see her hands shaking. He'd been on this show 5 times before and he still got nervous every time. "Hey," he said, taking her hands in his. "Remember the first night we met? When you were playing Rachmaninoff by yourself at midnight?" Rosa nodded. "Play like that tonight. Forget the audience, forget the cameras. Just you and the piano having a conversation. That's all this is." The stage manager called them and they walked out together. The audience applause was deafening. Daniel waved and smiled, then gestured to Rosa, making sure she got equal recognition. They sat down for the interview portion first and the host was warm and friendly. "So Daniel, this new album is getting incredible reviews," the host said. "But everyone wants to know about your collaborator, Rosa Martinez. This is her first time in the spotlight, right? It is, Daniel said. And I'm excited for people to hear her story because it's pretty amazing. The host turned to Rosa. So Rosa, how did you and Daniel meet? Rosa took a breath. They'd rehearsed this, but actually saying it out loud on national television felt different. I was working as a cleaning person at the recording studio. Daniel came in late one night and found me playing the piano during my shift. The audience made a collective sound of surprise and interest. The host leaned forward. Wait, you were cleaning the studios? Yes, Rosa said, her voice getting stronger. I'd been doing it for almost 4 years. I trained as a classical pianist in Colombia, but when my family came to the United States, I couldn't get my credentials recognized. Nobody would hire me as a musician, so I took whatever work I could find. Cleaning paid the bills, but at night, when the studios were empty, I could steal a few minutes with the instruments. That's what I was doing when Daniel found me. And what did you think when you saw her playing? The host asked Daniel. Daniel smiled. Honestly, my first thought was annoyance because someone was using my studio time. My second thought was disbelief because she was playing Rachmaninoff better than I'd ever heard it played. And my third thought, which I'm not proud of, was to challenge her because my ego couldn't handle that someone I'd written off could be that talented. The audience laughed, and Daniel continued. But Rosa destroyed my challenge. She played jazz, classical, improvisation, everything, and she did it so beautifully that I realized I'd been an idiot. I'd almost walked past one of the most talented musicians I'd ever meet just because she was wearing a cleaning uniform. Rosa looked at Daniel, and he could see gratitude in her eyes. He was being honest about his own prejudices, not painting himself as a hero. So what happened next? The host asked. Daniel kept his promise, Rosa said. He helped me get my credentials evaluated. He hired me to work on his album. He introduced me to people in the industry, and when I got an audition with the Los Angeles Chamber Orchestra, he even composed a piece specifically for me to perform. Because of him, I'm now a professional musician again. I have my dream back. That's an incredible story, the host said, and I think we should let the audience hear what Daniel heard that night. Are you two ready to perform? They moved to the performance area where 2 pianos had been set up facing each other. This had been Daniel's idea. He wanted it to be clear that this wasn't him with a backup musician. This was a duet, a collaboration between equals. They'd chosen to perform Invisible, a new song Daniel had written specifically about Rosa's experience. It started with Rosa playing alone, a haunting classical melody that gradually transformed into something more contemporary as Daniel joined in. Their parts wove together, sometimes harmonizing, sometimes creating beautiful tension, always in conversation with each other. As they played, Rosa felt something shift inside her. She wasn't nervous anymore. She wasn't thinking about the cameras or the millions of people watching. She was just playing, the way she used to play in her grandmother's living room in Bogota when she was 7 years old and first fell in love with music. The way she'd played in the empty studio at midnight, believing nobody would ever hear her. The song built to a powerful climax where both pianos played in unison, then gently resolved back to the original classical melody, now enriched by everything that had come between. When they played the final chord and it faded into silence, the audience erupted. People were on their feet, applauding, some of them crying. The host had tears in his eyes. That was extraordinary. Absolutely extraordinary. The performance went viral overnight. Not just the video from the show, but people started digging up the earlier clips of Rosa playing. Her story spread across social media, news outlets, music blogs. But the narrative wasn't about a celebrity saving someone. It was about a talented woman who'd never given up, even when the world told her she was invisible. The morning after the show aired, Rosa's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Orchestras from other cities wanted to talk to her. Music schools wanted her to give masterclasses. Other artists wanted to collaborate. Daniel's album shot to #1, but more importantly, people were talking about the bigger issues Rosa's story had highlighted. Why were so many talented immigrant musicians unable to work in their fields? Why was the credential recognition process so expensive and complicated? Why did society judge people's worth based on their job titles rather than their abilities? Rosa started doing interviews, and she was honest about all of it. The struggle, the disappointment, the nights she'd cried because she thought she'd never play professionally again. But she was also careful to point out that she was one of the lucky ones. There are thousands of people like me, she told one interviewer, Doctors driving taxis because their medical degrees aren't recognized. Engineers cleaning offices because they can't afford the recertification process. Teachers working in factories because the system makes it almost impossible to transfer their credentials. I got a chance because someone happened to hear me play and had the resources to help. But what about everyone else? 6 months after the talk show appearance, Rosa did something that surprised even Daniel. She announced she was starting a foundation called Invisible No More. The foundation would help immigrant musicians and artists get their credentials recognized, provide financial assistance for recertification, and connect them with mentors in the industry. Daniel was the first person to donate, contributing a significant portion of his album profits, but money came from everywhere. Other musicians, regular people who'd been moved by Rosa's story, foundations dedicated to immigrant rights. Within a year, the foundation had helped over 200 immigrant artists restart their careers. Rosa never forgot where she came from. She kept in touch with her former co-workers from the cleaning company. She gave free concerts at community centers in immigrant neighborhoods, and once a month, she'd go back to Sunset Sound Studios not to record, but to teach free piano lessons to the children of the staff who worked there. One evening, almost 2 years after that midnight encounter, Daniel stopped by the studio during one of Rosa's teaching sessions. He watched through the door window as she worked with a young girl, maybe 10 years old, whose mother worked in the studio's front office. Rosa's patience and encouragement reminded him of why he'd decided to help her in the first place. When the lesson ended and the girl had left with her mother, Daniel walked in. "You know, I never properly thanked you," Rosa said, starting to pack up her sheet music. "For what? You've thanked me 100 times. Not for helping me. I mean, yes, for that too. But for being honest about your own prejudices. For not trying to be a savior. For treating me like an equal even when you didn't have to." Daniel sat down on the piano bench. "I think we helped each other, honestly. You reminded me why I fell in love with music in the first place, and you taught me something important about seeing people. Really seeing them? What's that? That talent doesn't care about your job title or your bank account or where you were born, it just is. And if we're not careful, we walk past extraordinary people every single day without ever knowing it." Rosa smiled. "So what you're saying is I should thank your ego for being big enough to challenge me that night." Daniel laughed. "Yeah, I guess my ego is good for something after all." They talked for a while longer, catching up on their busy lives. Rosa's orchestra schedule was packed and she was working on her first solo album. Daniel was touring internationally and had started mentoring young artists himself, paying forward what he'd learned. As Daniel was leaving, he turned back one more time. "Hey, Rosa? Yeah? I'm really glad you didn't quit playing piano. Even when things were hard, even when you were exhausted from cleaning all night, you kept playing. That persistence, that refusal to let go of who you are, that's what changed everything." Rosa thought about all those midnight moments, stealing time with pianos in empty studios, playing for no one but herself. Those moments had kept her alive, kept her connected to her dreams when everything else was telling her to give up. "You know what?" she said. "I'm glad too. Because it turns out that even when you feel invisible, even when the world doesn't see you, you're still there. You're still real. And sometimes, if you're lucky, the right person walks through the door at exactly the right moment. And sometimes," Daniel added with a grin, "that person is just arrogant enough to challenge you to prove yourself." They both laughed and Rosa locked up the studio. As they walked out together into the warm Los Angeles evening, they passed a young woman in a cleaning uniform, pushing a cart down the hallway. She was humming quietly to herself, a beautiful melody that suggested she might have her own story, her own dreams. Rosa and Daniel exchanged a glance, both thinking the same thing. Then Rosa stopped and turned back. "Excuse me," she said to the young woman. "That song you were humming, it's beautiful. Do you sing?" The young woman looked surprised, then nervous, then hopeful. Yes, I used to. Back home in the Philippines, I performed in clubs, but here Would you like to come to a workshop I'm teaching next week?" Rosa asked, pulling out a business card. "It's for artists who are trying to break into the industry. No charge, no judgment, just people who love music." The young woman took the card with shaking hands, staring at it like it might disappear. "Really, you mean it?" "Really," Rosa said warmly. "Everyone deserves to be seen. Everyone deserves a chance." As they walked away, Daniel smiled at Rosa. "Starting already?" Starting? Rosa said. I'm just continuing what you started. Paying attention. Seeing people. Giving chances. And somewhere in the building behind them, a young woman stood holding a business card, humming her song a little louder now, dreaming of a future that suddenly seemed possible again.